Hello, friends. Thanks for joining me from another location. You know that if I'm filming in a location like this, um, I'm not at the store. I'm in my humble abode, surrounded by my personal kind of favorite records. And I'm here doing top 20 albums of 2023 for kind of a personal reason. I've sort of been doing this every year for a long time now. And for many years, I was kind of just like writing it down. Then I started blogging it for a long time. And with the store sort of going through the pandemic, and I started doing videos. And at first, I thought, I'm just doing these videos for me. And just so I have a record of my records that I love, one day I can look back on. And now it's sort of like getting enjoyed by some other people. So I think that's great. I mean, I'm not trying to hard sell anybody on these records, and I'm not pushing them on people, but they're things that I love. And I kind of went through this whole, I don't know, thing for a while of do I sort of say what the best albums of the year are, what I thought were the best albums, or should I just kind of do what are my personal best? And I've kind of settled on that, I think. And the older I get, the more comfortable I am with my choices that way. So, all right, so let's get started because I don't want this video to be over an hour like I think last year's might have been. So, but I do want to kind of give an honorable mention to something. Last year, my album of the year was an album by a guy named Sondre Lerche, who is a Norwegian singer songwriter. He's been writing stuff for, recording for about 20 years. And actually, recently, he's been starring in the Norwegian production of Moulin Rouge, the musical, being sung I believe it's actually being sung in Norwegian too. But anyway, so this year, last year he released Avatars of Love, which was a big double album. And this year he didn't really have an official album, but what he did have, and I kind of like it when artists do this, is he released this album. Uh, it's a very short album called Understudy, which I think has something to do with the fact that he's now doing some stage stuff too. But this is a picture of him from a mountaintop in Norway. And what Understudy is a collection of every year he would do, for the last 10 years, his favorite song of the year, and he would cover that and record it. Uh, so this year he decided to put out a collection on vinyl. I don't know if he did CD or streaming of this, but he only made 250 copies for the US on vinyl, so according to his website. So I felt very lucky to get one. But I don't know if you look up some of the songs there. You probably look this up online better, but it starts with Taylor Swift's Anti-Hero. He does his version of Lady Gaga's Rain on Me, Bob Dylan's I Contain Multitudes from the record that he had out, what, 3 or 4 years ago, Ariana Grande's Thank You Next, Hotline Bling by Drake, Chandelier by Sia, Wrecking Ball by Miley, Into You, Bad Liar, Selena Gomez. It's actually a really great kind of collection of songs, and he kind of puts his own spin on them to where, in some cases, they really don't sound anything like the original. They're very Sondrified, and I like that. So that's a special shout out. All right, so top 20. All right, I think I better start with. I kind of decided I was like, I don't know where to put these records, and it's not because I do like them. I've just never been a major fan of this band, but I do really like this album. But I felt like it needed to be a tie situation. So at number 20, I have a tie already to start with. And that would be Rolling Stones, Hackney Diamonds. and Iggy Pop's Every Loser. I feel like these albums really kind of bookended 2023 for me in a lot of ways. Hackney Diamonds, I've working in record stores for 25, no, 35 years. I know it's hard to believe, isn't it? This young face. Um, that I have heard so many Rolling Stones albums through the course of my tenure. And I don't know, the last few I thought were just sort of kind of middling in a lot of ways. They had good moments, but I really do feel like, in a way, Hackney Diamonds, they sound invigorated, reinvigorated, and it's amazing that 80 octogenarians are sounding this reinvigorated, and it doesn't sound like a phony put on. It just sounds like they're kind of finding what made them so, I suppose, likable in the first place. And yeah, so this album was produced by Andrew Watt, and Andrew Watt was also the producer of Iggy Pop's Every Loser. And he also is working with McCartney now, and I think he did Ozzy Osbourne's previous album. So it's kind of like whisperer to the older artists. I think not a horse whisperer, music whisperer. But anyway, so the year started with this for me. This was like the first new album I heard in 2023, and I just thought, man, Iggy's really on fire here, and I think Andrew really kind of brought that out in him. And songs like Frenzy, which were sort of kind of just like rah rah songs that had a lot of f bombs in them. But Strung Out Johnny is a really great song. I like Morning Show. I think that there's a lot of sort of political kind of stuff on this record, and a certain amount of it has kind of a tossed off like egginess to it, and other stuff is really melodic, and he kind of gets into his deep crooning voice that he has in his 70s. So I found that that was a really great effort from Iggy, and I think it's going to go really overlooked for a lot of people because it came out in the first week or two of 2023. So sometimes I like to go back and like look at those and try not to forget. And then the Stones, from the beginning to the end, I think it's a very solid album. Angry is probably one of my least favorite songs on there. That was the first single, but it was a good choice for single. I think Mess It Up is probably the most commercial sounding song on the record. I think a lot of people sort of were commenting on McCartney playing bass on Bite My Head Off, which is a good song. It's a little repetitive. I really prefer Whole Wide World, which is track 5. I think that's a really great song. Driving Me Too Hard is also a really great song. That's on side 2. And Tell Me Straight, Keith Richards' song, is fantastic. And I think that the one that he sings, I think there should be one or two more songs like that on the record, and it would be even better. And Sweet Sounds of Heaven with Lady Gaga is actually a pretty great song too. Maybe it gets a little bit like lengthy for, I think, for the reason of just being lengthy, as opposed to when they did it for Sympathy for the Devil, it was kind of with intention, and now it was sort of like, okay, let's do a song like that. But I thought she did a really great ad lib on that song, and it works. All right. I won't lose my voice. I've got a long time to go here. All right, number 19, Nation of Language. This is their album, Strange Disciple. And Nation of Language is a trio, kind of a synth pop trio from the US. They do have a married couple in the band. And I don't know, this was one of those records that I guess, I listened to their last record and it really didn't do very much for me. And for some reason, this one just sort of clicked. It reminds me of, well, there's a lot of live bass playing on it. So it kind of reminds me a little bit of like early OMD, Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, or sort of like that the early synth pop of the early 80s, late 70s, when it was kind of a little more stark. It's a very kind of open sounding album in the sense that they don't fill it with tons of layers of overdubs and stuff. It's actually like usually just get a couple of tracks at each time. It also sort of reminds me a little of new bands like Future Islands, newer bands. But I believe that Future Islands lead singer might be a little more polarizing for people than the guy in this band. Is Ian that sings lead. Anyway, so it's a good mix of live instrumentation and synth pop. So that was my number 19. Number 18. So last year, 2022, that was the year that I hesitate to say Wilco finally clicked for me. Now, I've liked a lot of Wilco albums off and on, don't get me wrong. And I think I read Jeff Tweedy's autobiography. I think he's an amazing writer and a neat guy. And I think I really like being from the plains myself. I kind of sympathize with a lot of his sort of surroundings growing up, that sort of the way he sort of sees life. And I really, really enjoyed Cruel Country. I've liked a lot of Wilco albums, like I said, Yankee Hotel, Sky Blue Sky, even back to Being There. But for some reason, Cruel Country was just like, it spoke to me because it was very political, but not in an angry sort of way. It was more sort of like a simmering, reflective, kind of bitter way about it, about the way that the country has kind of like lost. I feel it's sort of lost its sense of, in some ways, of being a caring country. We're so everything is so ugly and hateful and angry all the time, and I just think like if people just looked for a little more like love and peace once in a while, maybe I'd feel like we were going more in the right direction. So I kind of that album really moved me. And then this album this year, number 18, Cousin, I think is fantastic. Also, this was the album that they were working on when they started Cruel Country, and then they decided to kind of pivot and do more of a Americana country album, and which was a double. This is actually a single album, so it's much shorter. And I also like the fact that they didn't make me wait 7 months for the vinyl to come out for this. It came out on the same day, the vinyl, the CD, and the streaming all the same day. And I think it begins with the song Infinite Surprise, which that song is a definition of infinite surprise because of the way it sort of twists and turns. And at the end, you get this sound of like kind of fireworks that are very shocking. And I play it in the store, and people are always looking at me like, is there something wrong with your player? And it's like, no, that's intentional. So you'll know it when you hear it. And the second song, 10 Dead, I feel like that song got a lot of criticism because it was maybe glib or too like reductive of like how we turn on the news and see like, oh, no, there's no more than 10 dead in this like, shooting or whatever. And I think it sort of like in a way kind of tries to show how we all sort of normalize these things now, and that it's really a travesty that people are losing their lives in these senseless acts of violence. So I really appreciate the song 10 Dead. I think it's great. There's so many good songs on this album, and I mean it's not a long album like I said. I really love the last song, Meant to Be, because I feel like it's a song that's very uplifting and kind of comes from Jeff's heart. And so I recommend Cousin. Wilco, number 18. Number 17, can I show this? Lana Del Rey. Did you know that there's a tunnel under Ocean Boulevard? Well, maybe you do now. Like I've been a fan of Lizzie's music off and on for since the beginning now, which has been what, 15? Has it been 15 years? It's definitely been over 10. And I've liked a lot of records and then others sort of left me cold. It just really, I'm sort of all over the map with her. And this album, the first time I the first time I heard it, I was like, it's good. It's really quiet. There's weird stuff going on. What's with the screaming on some of these tracks where people are just talking, like the Judah Smith track? But I really do, and the John Batiste track too. I really do feel though like she's trying to tell kind of an American story here. The Grants, the first song is stunning about her family, and I think A&W has to be one of the songs of the year, if not the song of the year. So I think the album is sort of a little bit all over the place. It kind of there are things I really like. I like her song with Father John Misty, "Let the Light In." Taco Truck at the end is very interesting, and Peppers, the way it kind of like calls back to, I think it's the Venice Bitch, that the song that she did before in more of a hip hop sort of way, but I think it also kind of pulls her ethos sort of together. I just wish that I know this is going to sound cheesy. I kind of wish that she would do an album that's just sort of like, I don't know, an upbeat like rock record, or an upbeat kind of, just do like a disco record, something fun. That's the only thing she always, but she definitely has an artistic side. It's just, you get a lot of the sort of quivering vocals after a while. Maybe that's like tiring for some people, I could say, but I really do like this album, and I think it deserved to be on the list. So, number 17, Lana Del Rey. It sounded like backhanded compliments, I know, but I really do like that album. Number 16, it's just hard to play it in the store because it can be very disruptive at times. Boy Genius, the record. I sort of contemplated putting this higher many times, and I do love this album, and I feel like the the lyrics are just so special on this record, and the harmonies that these three women, Phoebe Bridgers, Julian Baker, and Lucy Dacus, um, the harmonies that they share. It is very much like I'll describe it to people as a modern day Crosby, Stills and Nash for women. But I think also it has a lot of edge in some of the lyrics. Also feel like there's so much you kind of learn about what it's like to be inside these women's minds, what it's like to be a young woman in this era, and the kind of I don't know, the personal sort of like internal conversations that they have, and the sort of not mini dramas, but like the am I gonna be good enough? Am I ever gonna find real happiness? I'm just trying to like make a connection no matter what it takes, and I just it's beautiful. There's so many good songs on this album. I think Julian Baker is the secret weapon of this band. I mean, as much as Phoebe gets a lot of attention, Cool About It is an incredible song. Leonard Cohen. I mean, I this is the album that I put on, and I can just drive in my car and be at peace and shed a little tear here and there, where it just really touches a nerve. I've had a lot of personal tragedy this year, loss of a family member, a really sick animal. I lost my cat, one of my cats last Christmas. So, and then I've had friends who've had a lot of loss, and we kind of share those things together. And that's an album that's a go to for me. I have to say, I think a lot of the things on this list I chose not always because it's the best musicianship or whatever, but it had to speak to me in some way, and a lot of them are very personal kind of things. So, um, this was very interesting at number 15, and I did not see this coming at all. My Back Was a Bridge for You to Cross by Anani and the Johnsons. Now, I was a I'd say a casual fan of Antony and the Johnsons, and then sort of in the middle of that career, I got more interested, and then Antony became Anani, and I liked some of her work a lot. Some of it was, when there were some electronic things in there. One thing I really loved, though, were she really did some great stuff with Hercules and Love Affair, their first record, and then the one last year. There were like 12 songs on the album, and six of them were sung by Anani, and those were the great songs for me from that album. But this was so interesting because this sounds like a throwback to like late 60s soul. Like all of a sudden, all of the kind of I want to say like the chamber rock and or chamber pop, and all of the kind of electronic stuff is gone, and we have a sort of really unique um, trans voice. And this is not Anahani. This is a picture of somebody else. But her voice, over this kind of retro soul music. There's one song that drives my wife crazy called Go Ahead, that's really short, that has kind of a screeching guitar, and it's sort of in your face. It's a little more punky. But the rest of the record, actually, Sliver of Ice is an incredible song that was about Lou Reed. Anani visited Lou Reed in the hospital when he was dying, and they gave him an ice cube to suck on. And he said that that inspired him to write that song about how it's just sometimes, you've done all these great things in your life, and at the end, it's sometimes the little things that really are the most meaningful. So anyway, I highly recommend this album. I think that Anani's voice is definitely sort of a you have to kind of get used to it if you're not used to it. It's very tremulous. She's done some kind of like sort of operatic things, sung with Bjork and a bunch of other people. So it's quirky, but it's really interesting to hear it in that kind of soul, American soul vein. I think it works. And I hope that they do more. She does more like that. So, number 15. Number 14, Jessie Ware. And this is Jesse's That Feels Good. Um, Jesse's last album, I think it came out the first year of the pandemic, so it's been like 3 years. That was like my number one or two album of that year, maybe three. That was right behind Fiona Apple or something. That was in there. Great album. This album, I think, is very, very good. To me, it's not quite as stunning as that album was. That one had like a very kind of New York early 80s electro sort of vibe to it, but still had a lot of live instrumentation. This does too, but it feels more like I'm purposefully trying to do kind of a disco record. And she just wanted something that was more euphoric and elated. And she got it out of this. This is a really great modern soul disco dance album. And if you're looking for something that is sort of in that vein, I highly recommend this. Um, she's done some stuff with Kylie Minogue, and Kylie's Tension just barely missed my list. But I do like that album too. It just wasn't on this. There are a few other albums that were sort of not on this list. I'll kind of like blow through a few at the end here so you can hear what wasn't there. Number 13, Gorillaz, Cracker Island. Well, of course, Damon Albarn has to be on my list, and I feel like this was his most breezy, most effortless sounding pop record that he's ever made. And I think with some people it clicked, and other people were like, it's too pop for me. What they didn't get was that this is one of his most political albums. There's a lot of sort of anger about like the Brexity type things, and like how the government has sort of like kind of become insidious in some ways. The title track with Thundercat is really great. Oil featuring Stevie Nicks. I mean, not that many. Who else can get Stevie Nicks to guest on your track? Silent Running is a great track. New Gold featuring Tame Impala and Booty Brown is great. Um, Even the Bad Bunny track, and then there's a pretty Beck track at the end. The only track that some people say they kind of go, Skinny Ape, which I think is he's basically just trying to say like, well, we're all just basically like we came from apes, and that's sort of where we're at. But it's one of his shorter albums, but I think it really works too. And I was glad to see a Gorillaz album come out earlier this year. It's hard to believe Gorillaz has been going for like 20 years too. So you know, besides that, there was a Blur reunion this year, and I may get to that soon. Number 12, Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark. And am I showing the right side? Oh, it's this side. Bauhaus Staircase is the name of this album. This is OMD's it's their highest charting album ever in the UK. I think it hit at number 2, right behind Taylor Swift. So this is a very like electropop sort of album. It just proves to me that don't give up, don't stop. These guys in their 60s, still making very relevant music and very catchy music, very inspired by Kraftwerk. I feel like they basically have earned the right to be called the British Kraftwerk at this point. Andy and Paul, among the other guys in the band too, but it's usually Andy and Paul that get all the attention. And they've been 40 years. They've been making record over 40 years. Signed to Factory Records back when Joy Division was there, and then sort of left quickly and went on to other things. But still has great artwork, very reminiscent of like Peter Seville's artwork. And there's songs on here like Kleptocracy, which is basically about people stealing from the government, stealing from us. And then there's ballads like Don't Go. Verushka is a very beautiful song that's sort of probably like the most Pet Shop Boys song they've ever done, sounding wise. And the title track is great. Anthropocene is a really cool track. It's quite long, and it's about sort of how, if you look back through history, it sort of traces the population of the human race, and by the end of the song, it sort of predicts where the human race is going to be if it keeps going on the road that it's on. It's kind of alarming, so but it's a great sort of Kraftwerky dance track. So, all right, number 11. That would be Slowdive. And this is the new Slowdive album, their first in 7 years. I'm trying to remember the name. Everything is Alive is the name of it. This is a rather brief album for Slowdive. I mean, 8 tracks. It took them, no, they're all long. It took them, 6-7 years. I think they were going to put this out a little earlier, and it sounded like when they started, it was going to be pretty much like basically a keyboardy album, and then it turned into more of a guitar-y, shoegaze rock type album. But it's very like dreamy, and it's the kind of album that you can put on and just kind of have it on in the background a little bit, not get it basically can kind of take you away from the troubles of your day. And especially like I really like the second track, Prayer Remembered, which is an instrumental. There's no singing on it, but most of the songs have very kind of minimal singing. I think Kisses is probably their most commercial sounding song that they've done that I remember. I mean, and it's great. It's very New Ordery type sounding. So The Slab is a great closer. I highly recommend Slowdive. And it was also one of those albums that I would play it in the store, and it was always selling when I was playing it. So it really kind of resonated with people. All right, my top 10. Number 10, Emma Anderson. And Emma is a former member of the band Lush, and this is her new album, her debut solo record, and it's called Pearlies. And Emma, the Lush story is very kind of sad and interesting. Uh, Two female friends from youth form this kind of shoegaze band, get produced by Robin Guthrie of Cocteau Twins for a long time. Then other people in the 90s, they were really hitting their stride and they were about to become really big, I felt. And then the drummer, Chris, went and committed suicide and the band broke up. And then it was like 20 some years, and then they decided to do a reunion, and they recorded a few songs, went out on the road, did some shows, and then broke up. And the two women, Emma and Mickey, just decided that, you know, they didn't like each other anymore. They couldn't work together. There were a lot of things that were said that were kind of hurtful, I think, on both sides. But I mean, I love both of them and both of their music, and I'm really glad that I can put this in the top 10 because I think this is a great album. If you like dream pop, sort of along the lines of, or dream rock, like the Slow Dive record, um, I think that this has a lot of like kind of darkness and in nuance to the songs. 10 songs. It starts with I Was Miles Away, which is kind of dark and moody. And there's one sort of instrumentally track in the middle. It was produced by the guy from Maps, the band Maps, James Chapman, and Richard Oakes of Suede played guitar on 4 tracks. But it's fabulous. It's new. Go check it out. Go stream it. Um, yeah, that was kind of a nice surprise. So, and apparently some of those songs were being worked on for what was going to be the big Lush reunion album that never happened. So, if you like Lush, I would definitely recommend that. It's hard to believe that's her first solo record. She kind of did other little bands in between, but none of them took off really. So, all right, number 9. So number 10 was Emma Anderson. Number 9, The Veils. And out of the void came love. So the Veils is basically Finn Andrews and some of his friends. Finn is the son of Barry Andrews, formerly of XTC and Shriekback. Finn has made several albums under the name The Veils for many, many years. He's from New Zealand, I think, or at least that's where he calls his home base, or Australia now. But anyway, this is his first album in like 6 or 7 years under the Veils name. It's a double album. I would say if any of you are fans of Nick Cave, especially like Boatman's Call era or something like that, you really need to hear this album because while Nick Cave has gone sort of really far in his art to the point that the songs are kind of more drifty and sort of like a lot of it was sort of relating to the death of one of his sons, now 2 sons, and and really soul searchy. It kind of lost some of the rockier or the kind of down tempo singer songwriterness of some of his music in the Bad Seeds. This is sort of picks up where that left off. The last Fails record, I wasn't that thrilled with. Some people loved it. It was a little more had like industrial tones to it or whatever. This sounds more like acousticy, rocky sort of. And the first song in particular, Time, sort of just completely won me over because it's a song that doesn't have a lot of lyrics, but all the lyrics are very like time is this, time is that, time, and it's you start thinking about, wow, it is all these things. It's a very haunting kind of song. So, and like I said, it's a double album. So he said he didn't really want people to listen to the whole thing in one sitting, but you can. There's the track "The Day I Meet My Murderer," who is sort of it's like almost like a talking song. but most of it is very sung. And if you liked, there were a couple early Vales albums that did really well. Nux Vomica in particular. If you like that album, also definitely listen to this. And the last song on here is Cradle Song, which is a cover of one of Barry Adams' Streakback songs that he wrote when Finn was a baby. And it was sort of about, it was kind of a lullaby at the end of the Shriekback Big Night Music album. So it's kind of cool to see that. All right, number 8, Blur, The Ballad of Darren. Well, I had Gorillaz back there at 13, so here's Damon Albarn's other album of 2023, The Guy Does He Ever Sleep? Blur actually did a reunion this year, shockingly so. I mean, I don't think anyone was really expecting that to happen, especially after what Damon said after the last time Blur tried to do a reunion, which was he wasn't really into it, so Graham Coxon had to go finish the album. But it was a great album, The Magic Whip. Anyway, this album, Damon said, was pretty much an elegy for his marriage. He and his wife broke up after many years. And so there's a lot of very heartfelt songs on here. And I feel like between this and the Gorillaz album, Damon has really come into his own as a vocalist in the last few years. I mean, he's always been very, very good, but he used to have kind of more of a, I suppose, a character kind of sound to his voice. Now it's like he's singing these kind of like melodies that just kind of spin out of each other, and his voice goes into places that are like he makes it sound so effortless. I think like when I was younger, I was a voice minor in college and studying opera and stuff like that. And I thought, oh, I don't know if I can go out there every night on stage and give like a belting opera performance, you know. And I think about someone like Damon, who is about, we're in the same age group, and how he has to go out there and sing, you know, not only like anthems to get the crowd sort of worked up, but these kind of spinning melodies that require so much air, breath control, and sort of like the way he sort of goes at notes. He just is a very unique musician, and I love that album. So, Blur, Ballad of Darren. Number 7, Sufjan Stevens, Javelin. What can I say? Sufjan, fantastic artist. You know, he sort of at first was kind of seen as, I think, a little bit of a NPR sort of kitsch novelty kind of thing with all of the state albums that never happened, even though we got a couple of them. But over time, I think he's really proved himself to be an artist that is really about the art and not about necessarily selling records. And I think that some people would say, oh, well, this is a pretty commercial album. And in some respects, it is. But I think that's mainly because Sufjan has bent the sound of commercial radio towards his sound in some ways, because he's so, you know, and he's not going to get played like next to like, I don't know what's super commercial, like Taylor Swift. But I mean, I think that he definitely influenced things like Taylor Swift, especially with the Folklore and Evermore albums. And he's played on albums for the National and vice versa. And who else is on the National records but Taylor Swift? And who else produces Taylor Swift albums but the guys from the National? So there's a connection there. And I think that Sufjan had a lot to do with that. His sort of acoustic kind of take on modern rock and incorporating like flutes and recorders and strings, and he does it all. I mean, a lot of these instruments he's playing himself. He does have you know, some female vocalists on this record with him, but you know, on first listen, I think Javelin is like, oh well, that's a very pleasant album, you know. And I do think that the song Will Anybody Ever Love Me is one of the most beautiful songs, if not the song of the year. And there are many songs on here I could say that. I love Fox. I love S Shit Talk. Um, there are a lot of great songs on here. But it can come off as like, oh, it's just he just makes it sound so easy. It's kind of surfacey. Then we got the story that he lost his partner this year to some kind of illness, which was kind of a double sort of revelation because I don't know if he'd really come out before, and I we didn't know that, at least I think in the masses we didn't know that his partner was also ill or had died. So it was when you listen to the album lyrics and you listen with that frame of reference, I think it takes on a lot new weight. What seems sort of simplistic or surfacey is much deeper than we all sort of would really think at first. But I definitely recommend Javelin. It's up there with Carrie and Lowell as one of his best. Um, so give it a shot. Okay, we're getting down to the end here. Number 6, Lemon Twigs. This is their album Everything Harmony. A couple of brothers from New York. I think they're from New York or New Jersey. Iggy Pop says, I love listening to vocalists like the Lemon Twigs who can really bring forth that sort of old pop rock sensibility from the early mid 60s. I think that's pretty accurate. This album is for the people who love like Simon and Garfunkel and want some of that back, some of that 60s harmonizing kind of stuff and really good kind of baroque pop arrangements and stuff. This album, I mean, they've had other albums before. Some have done better than others, but this was the one that really launched them commercially, I feel like, at least in my store. Sold quite a few copies of this. So every time I play it, people are like, who is this? Or is this the Lemon Twigs? So check out the Lemon Twigs if you have not. Okay, here comes a controversial choice. Number 5. I'm doing this purely on the fact that I love the music, okay? Number 5, Roisin Murphy's Hit Parade. So Roisin got herself in a little bit of social media trouble this year when she said some things that she probably shouldn't have said on social media when she said it right at the launch of her album, and that kind of derailed it at first. She's out there like doing shows now, and she had to basically take it on the chin and kind of do a lot of it herself. But she's a total artist, and I love this album cover, and I love the album. It's crazy, this cover. But her last record came out during the beginning of the pandemic, the first year, and it was a very kind of hard-edged, kind of disco, like modern dance album. And this has some elements of dance, but it's definitely more kind of summery, breezy, a little weirder. It reminds me of her Moloko albums, and if you don't know who Moloko is, you should probably look them up. They had, what, 4 albums from about 1995, 4 or 5, up through like 2003 or 4, somewhere in there. And they're all fantastic. Very quirky sort of R&B type albums generally. And then when she started doing her solo career, she's sort of like Bjork in a lot of ways, without the sort of like Icelandic and the sort of like really really odd. She can be odd, but she's more unique. She's not quite so far avant-garde like how Bjork is at this point. But anyway, Roisin Murphy. It looks like Rawson. I know it's nice that I got a signed one here, but Hit Parade, number 5. Number 4. This was probably the most I think not shocking, but the most out of left field that I was expecting this year. Corinne Bailey Rae, Black Rainbows. So Corinne came out to the scene in like 2006 with Girl Put Your Records On. Had a kind of a big hit with that. It was sort of neo soul, and she did a couple of neo soul albums, and they were very good. And her husband unfortunately passed away, the first husband. She's since remarried, and her new husband, newer, is her musical collaborator on this album. And what I love about Black Rainbows is Corinne basically does whatever the hell she wants to do. And so instead of being just a neo soul album, there's punk rock songs on here. There's deep jazz songs on here. I mean, the song Peach Velvet Sky has to be one of the most beautiful songs I've heard all year. And it could be like Ella Fitzgerald, Billie Holiday, somebody like that. And then you get these like I said, rock songs or like really dark kind of R&B songs. The album was inspired by her sort of walking through a museum exhibit of an African American, African based artist, and she really, loved that and thought, the album should be like walking through a gallery, an art gallery. And then she started trying to like say like, well, maybe we should go more this direction, and her husband was like, no, no, it should be exactly what you did, which is like this kind of journey of all these different styles. So I definitely recommend this album if you want something outside the box. Again, not as weird as like, some avant-garde artists, but I could sort of put her in that Roisin Murphy category as like women doing it their own way and being really just really interesting artistically this year. So, all right, top three. Number three, Peter Gabriel, I.O. This actually came out just last week, and I feel like I've heard it about 50 times already. This is the dark side mix. There's also the bright side mix. I like both, but for me, I prefer this one by just a hair because I think it's got a little more bass to it, and I love the sound of the ocean or the whatever the person jumping in the lake at the end of Road to Joy is much louder on this version, but I like them both. I feel like the bright side mix is probably more detailed. So depending on if you got the Mark Stent or the Chad Blake remixes, Peter's giving you the choice. I love this album photo too. I think it's sort of fantastic. This kind of was an album I've been waiting 20 years for, and for the most part, I was not disappointed. There are a couple of really upbeat songs, like I mentioned, Road to Joy. Olive Tree has this kind of almost like Earth, Wind, and Fire feel to it with these horns. Then you get beautiful songs like Love Can Heal, This Is Home. Those songs feel like mantras to me. Praying for Time, like I said, I had a family member very close to that passed away this year, and my cat right now has been very sick. So I feel like in a lot of ways we're all sort of praying for time, right? That's what we want. We want more time in this world if we can get it, if we're fortunate enough to get it. And it's sad what's going on in places in the world where they can't have that. But that song really gets to me. Every time it comes on in the store, I almost turn into like a bucket of tears. So anyway, great. The title track "I.O." is great input output. The Court is a very cool song. It's got like this chanting kind of vocal, and it's got this spacey, airy chorus. Reminds me a little of sort of parts of it like Digging in the Dirt. His song, same with Panopticon. That Panopticon, that song really reminds me more of like early sort of like Melt era Peter Gabriel. But anyway, Live and Let Live at the end is the sort of really upbeat track of the album, which makes you leave feeling like you've really experienced something. And I gotta mention the song And Still because that also totally gets me. The song about him talking about all the little things that he loved about his mother and how she's no longer with him. And he even describes like her eyes being warm, but her hands are cold. I mean, it's just, ugh, haunting, haunting stuff. Anyway, I'm getting choked up just like talking about it. All right, number two, Everything But the Girl, Fuse. Um, an album that came out of nowhere too, and I was like so happy with this record. And some people, I don't know, were a little bit like more, oh, it's good. And I'm like, it sounds like they picked up where they left off 24 years ago, you know? Tracy Thorn and Ben Watt have done a lot of solo work since. Tracy's done like 4 albums. I think she did a Christmas album. But Everything But the Girl, this married couple started recording in like 1982. so 83. Made several albums into the late 90s. It had a huge hit with the song Missing that was like a global number one. And then sort of disappeared and said, we're done with the rat race. Tracy wrote a lot of books. Ben worked with David Gilmour. Yeah, and they just kind of stepped away from it. She says she has stage fright now and they won't play live in front of an audience. So they were doing some videos online to promote this album, but it's definitely sort of like a reminiscent of those 90s club, late 90s club albums that they were doing. But there's also a lot of sort of like moments where things just kind of stop and you feel like um, sort of like this moment in time. I think that they recorded a lot of this during the pandemic or at the end of it, and sort of like they started like, well, what are we gonna do? We're at home alone. Let's just record a song or two, and then it became a whole album because they really wanted to give each other space. I think they were kind of like tired in a way, tired of working together, and I think this reminded them why they're so special together. I hope. But the first track, Nothing Left to Lose, is a great sort of dance track. It has like some jittery percussion and the bass is great and there's some really cool like programming on it. But then the second song, Run a Red Light, is this really drifty kind of still. It feels like, you know, when there's like a snow falling and it's very still. It's got that sort of a feel to it. Caution to the Wind is more dancey, but songs like When You Mess Up are like, you know, Tracy talking to herself, like, I'm a disaster. I've got these, you know, things going on in my life, like probably during the pandemic, and it's almost like you got to forgive yourself sometimes, you know. I think it's very deep album that way. The song Lost, she's sort of naming off all these things that she lost. I lost my bag, I lost this, I lost that, I lost my mother, I lost my mother, and repeats that over and over. And it's just a very haunting and deep song. And it ends with the song Karaoke, which is kind of more of an upbeat song. So I was really glad to see them return this year. And I know that they don't plan on touring much, but I certainly hope that they do more recording. And finally, number one. This was a hard choice at first, and then I'm like, why is this a hard choice? This makes total sense. Number one, Sparks. The Girl is Crying in Her Latte. Well, this is the third album in a row I think that Sparks hit number seven on the British charts with. So they're definitely having a renaissance in England. And I went to see them in July and it was a sold out show, 1,300 people. And so I'm like, these guys in their late 70s, well, Ron is 78, Russell is 74, could still get a lot of people to come and see them. And they can also get Kate Blanchett to dance in their music video. So the title track is kind of a weird, it's the first song and it's sort of a red herring, sort of. But for those of you that don't know much about Sparks, let me just kind of give you a quick synopsis. First of all, you should watch the movie, The Sparks Brothers, because I think you'll learn a lot about them. They're one of those brother duos, bands that never really made it big, at least not in the US. But they've always been sort of hanging around. They're from LA. They recorded with Todd Rundgren early on, almost 60 years ago, 55 years ago, 50 years ago. That's over 50, I think now. And did a couple albums under the name Half Nelson that sort of went nowhere. Then they went to England, recorded under the name Sparks because they liked the Marx Brothers, so they thought we'll be the Sparks Brothers. And they hit at the right time when Bowie and glam rock and Mark Bolan were really big, and they had a song called This Town Ain't Big Enough for the Both of Us that hit pretty big on the charts over there, and their album Kimono My House. And then after that, they had two or three really big albums, and then they faded in England. And then in the late 70s. They came back and did a disco album with Giorgio Moroder that was kind of a big album again. Brought them back, and then faded again. Had a hit song in France that was huge. Had a hit song in Germany that was huge in the 90s. But really never have been big everywhere all at once. And we're always kind of like the bridesmaid, never the bride. And it was this summer when they played at the Hollywood Bowl that Ron, the older brother, the one that looks like Hitler a little bit, came out on stage at the end and said something like, "It's great that we get to play on the stage where we came to see the Beatles back in 1965 or something like 64, like almost 60 years prior. It took them 60 years for them to get to that same point on the stage playing for a big audience." So that's a pretty amazing story. But the reason I chose this album, because I think they've had their last few albums have all been really great, and they're also a little bit of an acquired taste. There's a lot of repetition in their songs, and that can kind of take a little getting used to, I suppose. It didn't used to be like that. Like they were more of a like glam rock band, then a disco band, then a new wave band in the 80s, then more of a synth band in the 90s, then an orchestral type band in the 2000s. They're always changing, but they're always sparks. But the reason I love this album in particular, and the last couple too, is that I feel like this one really incorporates sort of the best of a lot of their eras all into one album. They can take a song that's very simple, like Escalator, which is sort of very light on words, or a song like It's Sunny Today, and it kind of has that reflective, it becomes almost like a mantra, that the way that they do it. Then you get a song like Nothing Is As Good As They Say It Is, which sounds sort of like their old This Town Ain't Big Enough song from 1974. But the song is about a baby who is born and says, "I was born 22 hours ago and I just want to go back inside my mom because this world is crap." And so these are the kind of songs that Sparks writes. They write a song, Mona Lisa's packing, leaving late tonight, which is like the Mona Lisa's had it, she's leaving town. Anyway, there's a song called Veronica Lake that's about like the old movie actress that's very kind of interesting and weird. Made me Google Veronica Lake, so I had to like Wikipedia her to see what that was all about. Of course, my wife knew. She's all into like old movies and stuff. A song like Not That Well Defined is a song that I feel like, Ron is the one that writes most of the music and lyrics, and then Russell sings them. So when Ron writes a song like I'm not very attractive, and Russell was sort of the matinee idol, when Russell sings I'm not that attractive, people are like, why? You're attractive. It's like, no, because his brother wrote the song. But a song like Not That Well Defined sounds like it's a song about Sparks, like sort of about how we're kind of like, this is who we are. We're not that well defined, or it's difficult to define people like us. Um, I have to mention the song We Go Dancing, because they did that song live, and it's the weirdest. It's a song basically about North Korea and Kim Jong Un, and sort of about how when the military march, they all sort of look like they're dancing, but really it's all kind of based around this sort of dictatorish, communistic, fascist kind of thing, and it's actually kind of evil in a way. And the music is very dissonant and repetitive, but the way that they go about presenting it, it almost makes like it seems like it's lighthearted. Like, Kim Jong Un is the greatest DJ. We love him. Like, it's a very weird song, but it caught my ear a lot. When You Leave is a really great song about like people who stick around at parties and just won't get the hell out. And it's like, when you leave, we're gonna have a real great time. So, and then he says, So I think I'm gonna stay just to make you angry. And Take Me for a Ride is probably my favorite song on here, which is, again, it's a song about a couple who are trying to liven up their personal lives by going out and like racing around town and causing lots of problems and stuff like that. But really, they're just like office type workers who are just bored with their lives. And so, anyway, and the last song, Gee, that was fun. Is sort of like it could be the last song that they ever record because it sort of sounds like, gee, our career was fun. We had 26, 27 albums. I think it's 27. And well, wasn't it a lot of fun? Wasn't it just all just a great story? So Sparks, the girl is crying in her latte. Some of it is like, again, the title track is very Dadaist kind of humor, and you know what is it's all these people that are sad all around the world, just like having a coffee break and um, reflecting on how terrible life is in the modern era. There are a lot of good things. There are a lot of terrible things. Anyway, well, that's a way to end it. So it did just go just a hair over an hour. I'm really sorry about that. You can pause this. I'm sure many of you have already, and we'll play it back at some point and catch it up. But I was just going to quickly run through some of the other albums that didn't make the list that I loved. There was a new album by Mitski that I thought was great, much better than the one that came out last year for me. Jason Isbell, I really liked his album this year. The Pretenders had a great new album. The Coral, Madness. Speaking of like British bands, I really liked the new Madness record. I'm still getting into it more. I like the Noel Gallagher record. I thought the Foo Fighters had like their best album for me in a long time, and unfortunately, it took the passing of one of their members to kind of bring those lyrics out of Dave Grohl. Caroline Polachek, I thought, had a really good pop album if you like sort of Imogen Heap type stuff. Taylor Swift, her reworking of 1989, I think, and Olivia Rodrigo's Guts, those were really good records. Albums that I'm sort of still getting into that I thought were good were Wednesday and Lankum. Duran Jones had a great album, The Young Fathers. I mentioned Kylie Minogue. The Church, I thought, had a really great album called Hypnagogue. So there are a lot of albums that didn't quite make my list, but that doesn't mean that I didn't like them. And my box set was probably the Prince Diamonds and Pearls box set. Maybe not quite as good as the Sign of the Times box set, but man, those concerts are just smoking. And I love all of the bonus tracks in there, or the fact that there are so many bonus tracks that were unreleased that we hadn't heard, and many of them could have been on albums or could have been on at least like singles or something, b-sides, I don't know. So the guy definitely had a vault of stuff that I feel like we're still not even like scratching the surface there. But all right, hey, thanks so much for joining me. I know this was a long one. I told you it was going to be long. Well, at least I told you, be watching for it. So everyone have a wonderful happy holiday season. Maybe you'll want to buy some of these records, I don't know. Check them out if you're interested at all. But that was my rundown of 20 of 23. Thanks. On to 2024. Ugh, an election year. Always bad for music retail. I hope there's some good music anyway. All right. Thanks. Peace.